How are they all reacting to this tonight?
Biden has a lot of family expressions, and one of them I've heard him invoke so often is that family is everything. It is the beginning, it is the middle, and it is the end. And in the, yes, more than a decade that I've covered President Biden, I have seen them come together to celebrate some of their greatest triumphs, the election, the inauguration most recently. But I've also seen them have to publicly endure some of the most difficult, some of the most tragic moments as a family. And this is one that, yet again, has brought the family together to have to really take stock of a very difficult moment. Really, the past week and a half has been so difficult to have to relive through this trial the most difficult moments of their family, starting with the death of Beau Biden and what it did to, especially Hunter Biden, leading to that addiction to drugs. But as I've been talking with people close to the family, Stephanie, tonight, I've really been struck by a tone of defiance, a resoluteness about what comes next. There's been a lot of concern about what this might mean politically, but also what this might mean personally for President Biden. He's just 21 weeks away from his last election. He's just 16 days away from a consequential, potentially, debate against Donald Trump. But the tone that I am hearing from people close to the president is that they are so proud of their public service as a family, and that nothing is going to stop them from achieving the goal that is set out in front of them. They know they have a difficult task ahead. The politics, the legal situation does not get easier road from here, but they are determined to face this together as a family.
Harry, you wrote in the LA Times that the jury's decision was right, but the prosecution's was wrong. I don't think I know what that means.
Well, let me try. So Department of Justice guidelines, Stephanie, have ways of handling cases. And cases like this, in which someone lies on a form but doesn't do any other crime with the gun or isn't part of a gang or whatever, are universally dismissed or not treated with the severity that David Weiss treated this one. And that's how David Weiss first proposed to treat this one about a year ago, when the gun charges were going to be the subject of a diversion agreement, that if Hunter Biden kept clean for 2 years, it would go away. So the screaming question that not the jury verdict, but the decision to charge presents, and I don't know what the answer to this question is what happened since then to so change Weiss's view of what was the proper punishment and treatment of Hunter Biden, to take it outside how DOJ practice normally would treat it. And of course, because he's a special counsel, no one in the DOJ supervisory structure, which normally would say, we don't do that to these cases, here's how we handle these cases. No one was there to say that. And I think it's certain, for whatever reason, that Hunter was treated way more severely than another defendant with the same facts.
Susan, you have written that you don't think a game changer could change voters' minds about this election. So I'm assuming you think this verdict is not going to have much of an impact here.
Steph, you're, we're getting to the point where you're anticipating me too well. I mean, look, if Donald Trump's conviction and becoming the first convicted felon in American history who is a former president, if that was not a radical change in the election, I certainly don't see the conviction of a private citizen, even one who is the son of the current president, to be that elusive thing, a game changer in this 2024 race. It's that close. There was minor incremental shift at best toward Biden. It's not entirely clear how this conviction of Biden's son will play politically. Certainly Republicans were immediately questioning this, saying, well, this is really just a distraction. There were all sorts of instantaneous conspiracy theories, default setting from some of Trump's public supporters and defenders. Hunter Biden isn't running for president, and that's the bottom line here. There's no evidence that years of investigations of him, of, dragging his name around, has really affected Biden's political standing, and I don't anticipate this would either.
Hunter Biden isn't running for president. We should remind our audience he has no role in our government, past, present, and no plans for the future. Harry, what could he be looking at as far as his sentence goes?
Well, so the standard guidelines, Steph, would dictate a sentence of between 15 and 21 months just based on the conduct and his lack of criminal history. But those are just recommendations. My best guess, consistent with what I was just saying about how people who don't do anything else other than lie on the form are treated, is that he'll receive a fair bit less than that from the judge. Remember, however, that there is still the tax charges that he has to face. And David Weiss today made it clear that, as he put it, the investigation is ongoing, and he may be targeting some of Hunter Biden's conduct in 2014 or so in China in business dealings. But for this charge itself, I expect him to get a sentence that's a matter of months, not the 15 to 21 that the guidelines would otherwise dictate.
But even if it's just a few months, Hunter Biden, unlike most people in his situation, has Secret Service protection. So how does that work?
Your guess is as good as mine, although we've been thinking about it. We know the Secret Service prepared a plan when it came up with Donald Trump. Trump was going to have his own wing, and people would be there. There would have to be a lot of cooperation with local authorities, although here it's easier because it's federal authorities, right? Bureau of Prisons and Secret Service. So that will be worked out one way or another. I think that's sort of the least of the practical issues that this conviction poses today.
Michael, you just sort of laid it out for us how close the Biden family is, how defiant the president is when it comes to protecting his family, how he talks about the family. Right around this time last year, I interviewed the president, much to his team's chagrin, anger, fury. I asked him about Hunter, and he very clearly said, "My son is an innocent man. My son is a good man." The president is now headed deeper into this campaign, to the debate stage. How is he going to handle the questions he's asked, the narrative around Hunter, now that we've got this guilty verdict and a president who does respect the rule of law and decisions made by a jury?
Well, just think about the gauntlet that's ahead, Steph. I mentioned 16 days from now is that first debate. The preparation is so critical. The president tomorrow is leaving for an important foreign trip. He's going to be at the G7 summit, meeting with other key leaders, as well as Pope Francis. You know how close this president is with that Jesuit Pope. It's going to be an interesting meeting. But then he comes back and has just a little over a week to prepare for that debate. We've never in modern history seen a rematch between combatants like Trump and Biden. And we know the strategy on the part of the former president is very likely to try to get under President Biden's skin and to potentially use this against him. The Biden team looks back at 2020 when, yes, Hunter Biden was again a frequent political cudgel that Trump tried to use against him. And the president's advisors say it didn't work then. It actually backfired on Donald Trump. And so they are presenting this as a do this at your own peril to Donald Trump. But I do think that is a concern of people close to President Biden, that as important as this debate is and as important as preparation is, will he be able to focus on the task at hand? The answer very clearly from those close to the president I've spoken to today is that's not going to be an issue.
Susan, I am sure you remember this question. Former President Trump, his friends at Fox News said it over and over and over. Where's Hunter? They said it for days, weeks, months. It seemed like years. Yet after today's verdict, the Trump campaign was basically silent, basically saying, oh, it's just a distraction. What in the world is going on here, Susan?
Well, first of all, Steph, I guess now that Donald Trump himself wears the label of convicted felon and has, been at the spearhead of the most kind of concerted assault that we've ever seen, I think, by one political party in this country against, the very legitimacy of the legal system, it's not exactly a comparison that is a favorable one, where you have Democrats from the president on down today saying, listen, we respect the rule of law. Biden isn't going to issue a pardon for his own son. As painful as this is, we think that, the jury system works and things like that. And so the contrast with Trump is obviously one that is very unfavorable and one that they're not eager to. And I'm just struck by how quickly Trump's allies immediately reverted to conspiracy theories and make believe. I can't stress that enough. They are still in burn it down mode when it comes to our legal system. And that includes, trying to imply that this case is a distraction from the real secret that's being covered up, the real case that should be brought against Hunter Biden. Whatever the conspiracy theory is, it's part of a really purposeful political plan to rip down the authority and the legitimacy of the legal system because of Donald Trump, because of one man.
Donald Trump is clearly not shy about saying he would get revenge on his perceived enemies in a second term. Are we taking his threats seriously enough?
Well, I don't think enough people are. When you hear Trump saying things like people are saying that retribution can be justified, what he really means is I'm saying retribution can be justified. And I think he's got a long list of adversaries he wants to go after. But I think the Justice Department under a Trump administration will be in continuing chaos as he tells his political appointees to go after Mr. X or Ms. Y, whether there are grounds to do it or not. And what those lawyers do will tell you a lot about their legal integrity. But I think it will put the judiciary under real pressure.
You might be on that perceived enemy list. Are you concerned at all for your own safety?
Well, I'm concerned about a lot of people that I think he has made it clear he wants to go after. Look, he tried to suppress my book. He tried to get a criminal investigation started. Both of those have been settled and taken out of the picture because they were utterly without merit. But I don't think those little technicalities stand in Trump's way. He said, for example, he wants to prosecute Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, for daring to have a conversation with his Chinese counterpart in the run-up to January 6th to assure the Chinese that they needn't worry. Trump says that's treason, and he reminded people that the death penalty used to apply. I think he's very serious. He may joke about it a little bit, but this will be a retribution presidency, and I think the Justice Department will be where the rubber meets the road.
You called the New York verdict a fire bell in the night, and you urged your party, the Republican Party, to nominate someone else at the convention. Do you think that that is something that could realistically happen? Is there a group behind the scenes potentially working on this?
Well, I don't think it's realistic, but I do think people ought to have a gut check at least one more time. For most Americans, voting for a convicted felon, I think, is going to be a real obstacle. And you can say all you want that this was a result of political discrimination against Trump. He'll be able to raise the selective prosecution on argument on appeal. But when the case was put in front of 12 regular Americans, New Yorkers like Donald Trump used to be, they found him guilty because I think the facts the prosecution presented were clear. And that is a problem the party will have and could affect Senate candidates, House candidates, gubernatorial candidates. And I think if he's electing the first convicted felon as president of the United States, it's going to cause real damage to the United States and how we're perceived abroad.
Then, given the guilty verdict today for President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, what do you say to those Republicans who claim that Joe Biden has weaponized the Department of Justice and made it his political tool?
Right, and basically shot his son in the process. I mean, it is a conspiracy theory. I can speak as an alumnus of the Department of Justice. You couldn't do in that department what Trump's supporters say has been done and not have it leaked to every major media outlet in the country. It is possible to be the victim of selective prosecution and unfairly so, and also be guilty. And I think certainly that's probably true in Trump's case. In Hunter Biden's case, they're not done with him yet. This is the first case. There's going to be an income tax case, and the U.S. Attorney Special Counsel's investigation into Hunter continues. So it's I'd like to see what the impact of this case is on the election. It will have an election impact, even though it's not Joe Biden, it's his son, and see what people think when Trump says, poor Donald Trump. The whole world is against him, apparently against Hunter Biden, too.
Do you think Donald Trump is a threat to democracy? We keep hearing that phrase out there. I want to know if you believe it, and if so, practically, tangibly, what would it look like?
No, I don't think he's a threat to democracy or our system. I think he will cause enormous damage in a second term, and it will be a term of confusion and turmoil. But the idea that Donald Trump is going to overthrow the United States Constitution, overthrow the Republic, that he's an existential threat to democracy, gives him too much credit. I think it's important to state the threat accurately. Not to overstate it, not to understate it, but to understand what the nature of the threat is so people who oppose it can combat it more effectively. Overdoing it, I think, gives Trump a break, and that's a mistake.
Well, you've said that Donald Trump doesn't have the brains for dictatorship, even though he has said that he would be a dictator on day one. Does that make him any less dangerous if he's not that smart but still wants to be a dictator?
Well, I think it goes to the point that while Donald Trump has an infinite span of attention when it comes to the greater glory of Donald Trump, his attention span on most other issues is about equal to a fruit fly's. So that his opponents and even some of his supporters who try and move him away from the most dangerous things that he does will have plenty of room to try and step in. I'm not trying to minimize what I see Donald Trump doing. I think what he was doing at the end of his first term is where he will pick up the day he's inaugurated. And it's serious. But when you say the Republic itself is going to fall like the Roman Republic fell, really? People think Donald Trump is equal to Julius Caesar? I mean, give me a break.
He might not be, but this time around, he won't have the safety guards of a you and H.R. McMaster. The list goes on. Are you concerned about the people that are in his current orbit and what they're capable of doing and how they could influence him?
Yes, I think any administration in a second term doesn't attract the quality of people it does in the first. It just for the very practical reason the runway in a second term is shorter. Trump will be a lame duck the minute he's sworn in. And he's got a lot of people around him, basically the people who stayed in the government after January the 6th, who are second and third raters at best. I think the bigger danger, though, is that Trump will insist in staffing a second term on personal loyalty to him above all. He's coming up with his decision for his vice presidential nominee. And I think the two questions on the interview form are, number one, do you think the 2020 election was stolen? And number two, if I told you in a similar situation to do what I told Mike Pence to do, would you do it? And unless the answers to both those questions are yes, then that person's not going to be considered for vice president. I think you're going to see something similar in virtually all the key positions. That is a very dangerous circumstance. And to the extent the Senate, Republicans included, take the confirmation process seriously, if they see people who are more loyal to Donald Trump than they are to the Constitution, that alone is grounds to vote against him.
Is there a specific person that's close to him now that you see as highly dangerous that you're worried about?
Well, I wouldn't want to give any of them Academy Awards. I mean, I think there are bright people, including some people in the House and the Senate, who have joined this cult of personality. And the smarter they are, the more dangerous they are.
You are giving us some very serious warnings and things to take seriously. But something that I'm going to say is not that serious is a write-in vote. This election is going to be Joe Biden or Donald Trump. In 2020, you wrote in Dick Cheney. You have said you would do it again. Are you really giving a clear and honest warning if you're willing to do another writing that won't help anything?
Look, I bought that argument in 2016 when Hillary Clinton ran against Trump, and I voted for Trump in 2016. I mean, Hillary and Bill were a year ahead of me in law school, and I like to say I'd been bird with them a lot longer than the rest of the country. But after working for Trump, obviously I couldn't vote for him, but I didn't vote for Joe Biden in 2020 and won't this year because I don't think he's fit to be president either for different reasons. So when you have two people who don't cross the bar of acceptability, I think it's legitimate to cast a protest vote. I hear a lot of Republicans who told me a year ago they weren't going to vote for Trump, but they look at Biden and they will choose what they consider to be the lesser of two evils. And I hear other Republicans and some Democrats say the opposite. So, you know, it's an unhappy time for America when these are the two people we've nominated, and it will be a bad 4 years for America, whichever of them wins.
Then are these concerns that you have that serious? Writing somebody in who won't win is not serious.
It's a protest vote. If I didn't vote for anybody this time, it would be a protest vote as well. I'm not going to vote for somebody I think is not qualified, not fit for the office. I'm not going to vote for people whose principles I don't agree with.